Nation, and of course, as we commemorate World AIDS Day today, Uganda's theme is Know Your Status, and I hope tomorrow you will be out there to check for your status. But today we will have a discussion with an expert who's been in the field for a very long time, worked through the ministry, and he is now currently at the College of Health Sciences, Dr. and Professor Anthony Mbonyi, formerly Director General of Health Services in the Ministry of Health. That's coming up next. Professor, welcome to NTV tonight.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I'm happy to be here. Good evening, viewers.
We will start quickly, of course, from your experience working generally in the health sector, without particularly pointing out any specific areas. Today we are commemorating World AIDS Day. It's a struggle that we've had here in Uganda for 3 decades. We have, something to rejoice about as regards the achievements, but I want us to, start from looking at what we still have, what is still left to catch up with, because the goals set globally for the 1990 targets are, catching up with us very soon. 2020 is not very far from today. The figures that we get from the Ministry of Health is that we are at 60% suppression. Is that, something we need to rejoice about as a country?
I think so. We need to rejoice about that achievement, because that is the population-based indicator, that's a population-based viral load suppression. But the program data says that it is about 85%. And if your target is 90% and you are at 85 or anywhere around there, you have a lot to celebrate about that. But of course, the ministry has achieved a lot in terms of people accessing HIV testing and counseling, putting people on antiretroviral therapy, and making sure that people are aware about how to prevent HIV. There are still challenges.
95,000 children living with HIV currently in Uganda, and of course we've been stuck with the question of introducing sex education to our curriculum, but of course there's been some steps, a framework was developed. Is this going to be of great importance? So
as we said, the challenge is that adolescents are sexually, some about 25% are sexually active. They are getting pregnant, they are getting HIV, and we have issues about how to introduce sexual education. But the point is that if adolescents are sexually active and they are getting HIV, they are getting unwanted pregnancies, they are contributing to high maternal deaths through unwanted pregnancies ending up in illegal abortions. We need to make sure that they access services. Information, very important to get information on how to seek services, such as how to use condoms, where to get family planning methods, contraception, where to get HIV testing and counseling, and also we have to emphasize that they have to abstain from sex because they are still young. And this should start from the family, start within the community, within the churches. Everybody has to have a role. The members of parliament, the cultural leaders, the community leaders, so that we emphasize that young people are supposed to abstain until they get married. But if they don't abstain and they are getting HIV, they are getting pregnant, we also must ensure that the policies are conducive so that they can have services for HIV testing and counseling, for contraception, condoms. And for a long time, the ministry has used a combination of prevention methods. And the ABC, since the 80s, abstain if you are young and not married, be faithful if you are married and stick to one sexual partner, your partner, and then if you can't and you are involved in risk sexual behavior, then use a condom and use it consistently. And we have also other biomedical interventions that have been implemented, made circumcision. We encourage men to circumcise because circumcision reduces the transmission of HIV, reduces does not eliminate the risk, but reduces. We have other interventions like elimination of mother-to-child transmission, and this has been spearheaded very well by the First Lady's office. And we have post-exposure prophylaxis, and then of course we have antiretroviral therapy. And the target of saying that 90% of the people living with HIV should test and know their status. The 90% of those who test should access antiretroviral therapy, and then those who access antiretroviral therapy should use it consistently, very well adhere to the dose, and then so that we can have 90% of viral load suppression. Now we have challenges in those. We have definitely we do not access all the people who are living with HIV, so we encourage people to test. And even those who we put on antiretroviral therapy, we need to ensure that they take the drugs consistently, drugs of high quality, make sure that we don't get drug resistance, so that we can have viral suppression. So it is, we should make sure that we work with the development partners. We should work with parliament, politicians, we should work with the community, we should work with the religious leaders, cultural leaders, the research community, so that we look for innovative ways in which we can reach, for example, the young people.
Exactly. Professor, if you talk about reach and access, there's a particular problem in the country that specific groups of people cannot actually access, even if they, wanted to have these services offered to them. And we have people like, groups like sex workers, we have, people in the LGBT community. And those are minor groups or minority groups that people don't want to talk about, and of course they feel also marginalized. How will I go to a health facility and talk to these people if I belong to this kind of group? Throughout your experience, what ways do you think we need to, get these people closer? Because actually, these groups have, a high prevalence of HIV, especially sex workers.
Yeah, we call these key populations. We call these key populations, and why we call them key population is that they are key in that they are drivers of the epidemic. They have the high prevalence of the disease. The new infections are occurring, yet they are difficult to reach. And one of the causes of this is stigma. We have stigma, commercial sex workers. We have stigma on the gay people. And I think the first thing to do is to eliminate or reduce this stigma. So we need to reach this in the strategies of the ministry. The key populations are one of the priorities for making sure that the condoms reach them, and the ministry has been working with the commercial sex workers, the leaders, so that they can access condoms, they can access treatment for sexually transmitted infections, and HIV testing, and be able to be linked up to antiretroviral therapy. The commercial truck drivers, the fishermen, the soldiers, the people in Namdi uniform, all these are key populations. And our strategy, if we are to reduce the HIV epidemic, the incidence, especially the new infections, and we have a dent on the epidemic, we must reach these key populations. So we need to work very well with the research institutions. We need to make sure that we have innovative ways of reaching them, getting people who can reach them, talk to them, bring them to the services. So this is very important for the strategies of the ministry, especially if we are to achieve the 90 target.
I want to pick your mind on some of the new revelations that are coming up. There are some countries, and of course this is in Africa and some other parts of the world, that have introduced laws criminalizing, exposure to HIV and AIDS. And of course, this is being contested that if you want to criminalize someone who has introduced or exposed another person to HIV, then how will they come out and speak out, how will they get, still this also falls back to stigmatizing, and of course some people, come out and say this could even lead to some other cases like domestic violence, gender-based violence. What do you think about that?
Criminalizing HIV transmission and acquisition is not good for everybody, but there are those people who deliberately transmit HIV, and if it is found out, those could be punished. And I think even in the laws here, if you transmit HIV deliberately, that's more near to criminal. But ideally, HIV, the way it is transmitted is through sexual intercourse, blood transfusion, through mother-to-child transmission, and you can't criminalize that because nobody intends to, for example, many people who acquire infection do not deliberately go ahead to get it. Only, of course, they are very careless, but carelessness cannot be criminalized. So we should not criminalize it for all the cases except those who are definitely deliberately transmit the infection. But the stigma, part of the stigma is that people should know that HIV is like any other disease, like mental illness, is like malaria. You can test and then go on antiretroviral therapy and live positively and contribute to the economy of the country. So it shouldn't be stigmatized. But of course, in the initial stages of the epidemic in the 80s, there was a lot of stigma, there was a lot of fear, and there was a lack of information. But now there is information. People know that HIV can be treated, and you live, well, it may not be treated. You can live positively through viral suppression, and you live a healthy life, and you contribute to society and the economy. So it shouldn't be, to reduce stigmatization is more giving people information, making sure that people are aware how the HIV is transmitted, how it can be prevented, and how you can access treatment. All this will contribute to reduction of stigma.
All right, Doctor, thank you very much for joining us. Our time is fast spent. I know, of course, the passion you have for health. We could speak until the cows come home, but we'll end it here. And of course, Dr. and Professor Anthony Mbonyi, formerly the Director General of Health Services in the Ministry of Health, currently with the School or College of Health Sciences at Makerere University, joining us tonight on Talk of the Nation.
Yeah, thanks a lot.